Hello YouTube, Kevin here for Superpower Broadcasting. In this video, I'm going to be discussing a bit about what it's like to basically come out as a hawk in university. And I'm somebody who studied political science as one of my majors in university. And to go to basically a university and harbor have in your head ideas that intervention is good, ideas that liberalism is universal, ideas of moral universalism. Well, if you espouse them publicly, that can definitely ostracize you. And I had always been a hawk and a liberal moral universalist since I was about 12, 13 when I really started to become aware of politics and whatnot. And, in the most sort of primitive of ways. But the thing is, I wasn't really that public about it until my fourth year in university. I mean, in high school, I had defended Israel, even though I was the only person in my class. Everybody else defended Palestine. And the history teacher that I had, he argued that, well, the reason why he was defending Palestine, the main reason was that Israel always responds, as he said, disproportionately to when Hamas fires rockets over in Israel. And the way that I look at it is the proportionality shouldn't matter. It's the morality that matters. Who's on the right side, who's on the wrong side. If you start a war, you don't get to complain if the other side retaliates with more force than you used in the first attack. That's stupid. That's moronic. That is wholly illogical that we're even having a conversation about proportionality, right? No, of course you respond massively. You want to end the war as soon as possible, right? Proportionality is just this tit for tat, keep the war going on 100 years, Westphalian, uh, just lack of any sensibility whatsoever. And I rejected that. And that makes you an outsider. That makes you somebody that gets accused of being an imperialist or an establishment shill. But of course we know that these people who have that stance are perfectly fine to shill for the Russian establishment or the Chinese establishment or the North Korean establishment, the Iranian establishment, the Syrian establishment. They just don't like the American establishment, which, for all of its flaws, is the only one in that group that I just listed that isn't wholly contemptible. So let's just keep that real. So then in university, of course, most of the people that you meet are isolationists. The people that I met, for the most part, left-wing isolationists, met some right-wing isolationists, some Trump supporters, a lot of people that were very, Noam Chomsky type. But either way, America is seen as, this evil empire, this imperialist sort of thing that's going to get us into World War III or whatever, as they say. And we all need to bow down and lavish effusive praise upon, the Emperor Vladimir Putin and all this stuff. It's such a disgrace because, the Emperor Putin, he's such an anti-imperialist. That's why he annexed Crimea. I mean, it's a joke, right? So, however, it wasn't until fourth year when I really came out as a hawk, right? And when most of the people that you know and everything that you talk politics with and whatnot are isolationists, yeah, there's a bit of a rupture there, right? And my regret with university, I went to university for 5 years. I majored in economics and political science. My regret is I didn't come out as a hawk sooner. Maybe if I had come out as a hawk in first year or second year, I could have started something. I could have, inspired other people to come out and embrace moral universalism and stand up for liberal values and whatnot, and made some friends that were, neocons, liberal hawks in university. I have a lot of friends now that I've met that are liberal hawks and neoconservatives. Most of them are online, of course, But the thing is, I have no cognitive dissonance anymore. Every day I wake up. Sure, I get angry about stuff. You know, I make videos on here. I've been completely outraged. I've been outraged at the fact of Trump's incompetence and isolationism. But I still feel mentally well. I still feel mentally and morally consistent. Whereas before, when you're hiding this aspect of yourself, it doesn't feel that great. You're aware of the cognitive dissonance, right? And so to be rid of that feels liberating, of course. And but of course it comes with consequences. Everything in life comes with consequences. So I lost about a dozen friends or so, I would say, um, because of my moral convictions and my support of intervention. And at the one on the one hand, it's seen as, you know, that's unfortunate, and I agree. But on the other hand, well, it was politics that largely, I wouldn't have met them if I wasn't studying political science. It makes sense that politics would also be a dividing factor, right? If politics brings you together, it's likely there'll be politics that will bring you apart, right? Separate you. That makes all the sense in the world, of course. And some people have this idea out there that you should put politics aside from friendship. You should not discuss it. You shouldn't talk politics or religion. Well, it's one philosophy. I can understand that. If you never talk about it, it never comes up. You might not even know you have disagreements. Well, that's logical. That doesn't really work when you're in a political science program. You kind of have to talk about politics, right? So that's not really an option there. The other school of thought, of course, is just be cool, with diverse opinions. Just accept, just tolerate that some people, think that democracy is degenerate and that, Israel's bad and that, it's the Jews running everything and whatnot and all that stuff. And just accept that they have a different opinion than you. Well, I'm not in that camp. And when I say that I'm not really friends with these people anymore, part of it was they didn't want to be associated with me, but I also didn't really want to be associated with them. So it was kind of a two-way street, It wasn't all, me saying I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, and it wasn't them saying I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. It was kind of a mutual agreement for the most part that we're just not going to talk with each other anymore, that we have a different perspective on the world. And I would argue, in contrast to the previous two schools of thought on the issue that I discussed, it actually makes more sense than almost any other issue that you would separate or cease relationships over politics, because politics isn't a sport. It's not a game. I talk about this on this channel quite a bit. That no, there's a morality at hand. There's the future of humanity at hand. There are fundamental convictions at hand. If you disagree with someone on the fundamentals, then it makes all the sense in the world that you may have an intractable difference that brings you to no longer associate with each other. Is it unfortunate? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ideally, I would have been able to sway everybody over to become a liberal hawk with me, right? But this is the real world. That's not how it works, right? So with this channel, I can do my best to reach out to, new viewers, and a lot of young people, they grow up and they watch YouTube as their primary source of news if they're into politics and stuff. I want to try to reach new people and prevent them from suffering that kind of cognitive dissonance. Being proud to be a hawk from day one, that's a much better way to go about things, of course. And if we can change the culture, that would be a wonderful thing. But the reality is that we're living in an era of cringe. We're living in an era of populist, Kremlin-sponsored isolationism, where the second you have any argument whatsoever that is interpreted as hawkish, you're immediately seen as a shill for the Jews or a shill for the establishment or an imperialist, evil, no good neocon or whatever. And of course, in many ways, I am basically of the same strand of thinking as neoconservatism when it relates to foreign policy. I just happen to be socially liberal. But so did most neoconservatives when they were younger. Now, I'm not saying that I will become conservative by any means. I'm just saying that you can be a liberal and be a neoconservative, just as you can be conservative and be a hawk. They are both consistent positions. The thing is, with all this coming out as being a hawk and everything, well, I'd always, in terms of like writing papers and stuff and whatnot, you have to walk a line. I kind of stopped that in fourth year too, where I didn't really care about whether I was going to get a good grade with the paper or not. I was just going to more or less write my opinion on things, write things how I saw it. It didn't really hurt me or anything academically. The thing is, though, when you do have opinions that align with the United States over Russia, Iran, Palestine, North Korea, yeah, you're seen as an imperialist. And imperialism is the greatest crime if you're in a university. You can be anything. You can be left wing, you can be right wing. Doesn't matter. Because if you like Tulsi Gabbard or you like Rand Paul, you're a good guy, Good for you. You're fighting the U.S. establishment. Yeah, sure, you're promoting the Russian establishment, but that's cool. But if you're seen as unapologetic, supporting America, oh, you're scum of the earth, you're filth, you're white supremacist. That's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, what a joke, right? I mean, because it's not like Assad. Assad, the Ayatollah, North Korea, their dictator. What, are they white? Oh no, they're not white. They happen to be other skin colors, and they're butchering millions of people collectively. So, I mean, white supremacy, what a joke. I mean, the whole fundamental idea of liberalism in America is that everybody's equal and that all humans have dignity. The fundamental idea of North Korea and Syria is that all humans are unequal and everybody serves the dear leader and bootlicks for the dear leader. That's the difference. And to see these people in the West on college campuses defend the most brutal dictators that would have them executed, that would have them taken to the back and their families taken to the back in the gulags for being cosmopolitan, bourgeois, liberals, for being educated elites. I mean, these people, the Noam Chomsky types, they would be executed so fast in any communist society. Just watch the movie Stalin. It does a great job of showing you how these communist systems actually work and how it's usually the most doctrinal and most old Bolshevik types that get executed and taken to the back, right? And put a bullet in their head. That's how these things go. So to see these people that are usually pretty skinny and they wear the jeans and, they listen to all this, music that would be outright banned in any of these communist countries, then go on and argue that North Korea is actually the one being aggressed upon or whatever. What a joke. Because I don't even care if America's the aggressor. I want America to be the aggressor. Because guess what? That's how you liberate people. You don't liberate people by sitting around and singing Kumbaya and singing praise of Kim. You liberate people by killing Kim. It's as simple as that, right? So, let's just grow up, right? And so, to go to school between 2013 2019, that is basically when the era of Obama's isolationism turned into the era of Trump's isolationism, where it got a lot worse, and it's even cringier now. And you would be surprised about the support on, supposedly liberal campuses for things like Brexit and Trump and, of course, Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders is also a nationalist and, he's also in that whole sort of Rand Paul camp when it comes to these things. It's just, there's just that dynamic where the right and the left congregate, and the worst ideas of the right and the worst ideas of the left come together in university, right? And when you step outside of that and you say, no, I'm a moral universalist, I'm a liberal hawk, I'm an interventionist, well, most of the professors are going to think you're an imperialist. Most of the students are going to think you're an imperialist. But I just didn't care anymore because I realized if I died, for example, before I came out as a hawk, I would have been remembered as somebody who just fit in, somebody who never really spoke their opinions, you know? And that's not being remembered at all. That is no legacy worth having. Another thing that really inspired me to come out to be a hawk was I read numerous books, of course, on international relations, foreign policy, geopolitics, etc. Um, Reading Christopher Hitchens, that was definitely some impetus right there to come out. I mean, he lost a lot of friends when he came out as a hawk, when he defended the Iraq War, because he was originally, left wing, a socialist and all this, and he maintained a lot of those ideas to his death. But in the eyes of most of the leftists, he was just disowned. He was this egregious imperialist. He was a no good, evil USA neocon in their view. But he didn't care because he knew that some things are worth fighting for more than holding on to friendships. And that was definitely something that stood out to me and inspired me to come out as a hawk. Another was reading Kenneth Rowe's book, The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot. It's about North Korea in basically the Korean War, that whole sort of era. He defected from North Korea. And there's a story that he tells when he defected from North Korea. And this is just a microcosm of the brutalism and brutality and inhumanity of the countries that we are opposed to. And so he sees the opportunity. I won't give some huge synopsis of the book or anything. I'll just talk about this one moment that really stood out to me. He talks about before the defection, he's walking with one of his fellow airmen. They're like 18. I think Kenneth might have been 17 at the time. And they're walking around. And, I believe it's the night before Kenneth plans to take the opportunity and defect. And they're walking around and they go into this one village. And his friend, he was talking about, how he wants to, go and hang out with the girls and all this sort of stuff and everything. And he was talking about, how he's a virgin and all this stuff. And, he wants to get laid and all this. And he basically, he wanted Kenneth to be his wingman, in the dating scene as well as they were in the air, right? When they were training with the North Korean Air Force. And the thing is, Kenneth, though, the whole time, what's going through Kenneth's head is like he's exhilarated. He's gonna pull off a defection pretty soon, right? That's pretty terrifying, right? To defect under Kim Il Sung's nose. And he talks at one point about how he had the opportunity early on in the war, early on when they landed at an air base, when Kim Il Sung came with his young son Kim Jong Il, just basically a toddler, and inspected the facility, and he remarks about how he actually had his pistol on hand and they didn't take it away from him because they trusted the pilots. And he said, I could have shot Kim Il Sung right there and I could have ended this whole thing. And I could have, because he hated communism and he could have done it. But then he said, but then I would have never had freedom. I would have been dead too. So he didn't do it. He wanted the freedom. And I don't blame him, because he would have been executed. But the thing is, he gets his chance to get freedom. That night, as they're walking around and everything, Kenneth, I believe, decides to go home. Not much comes of it. I believe he remarks that fellow airman of his didn't really have that much luck that night or whatever. And the next day, Kenneth's on this training sort of mission. He takes off. Goes about his regular procedure. He turns to the south and he keeps going. And, he's in a MiG. It's the fastest jet back then, right? He's over the border so fast they can't catch up to him. Then it's just an issue at landing in Seoul. He does it. From under the nose of Kim Il Sung, as Kim Il Sung is in Moscow with Stalin, he defects in his MiG, I believe it was a MiG-15. May have been a MiG-17. I'm pretty sure it was a MiG-15 though. And now that's this huge scandal for North Korea. It's an embarrassment. And he got his ultimate victory against Kim Il Sung. He embarrassed and disgraced him in front of you know, his dear leader Stalin, man whom he drew such inspiration from. The two communist devils, right? And the thing is, the moment in the book that really stood out to me, of course, is that later on, as Kenneth Rowe is remarking about those days before he defected, he talks about how he found out from somebody, and I forget exactly how he's able to find out, but that former airman of his, right, in his squadron, was rounded up and shot, right? The others too. I believe there were 3 in his squad. After the defection, they were rounded up. They had rocks placed in their mouth. They were tied to poles and taken to the back and shot. And that's that. So this guy was killed basically at like 18 or whatever for a crime that somebody in his squad did. So that's collective punishment. That's communism. That's how socialism works right there. And that was something that really kind of made me kind of reflect upon because, I've studied these regimes for over a decade. I know how they operate. I know a lot of the statistics around their death tolls. But this was one of those stories that really kind of made it personable. It really kind of made it on a one-to-one sort of human level where you can relate and say, that guy could have lived to be, 85, 90 years old, had a great life. And instead he was executed so that this fat old man, Kim, can have his Benz and his power. His old Benz, his old rickety little his S-Class Benz from back in the 50s or 60s or whatever. Absolute disgrace. And it really made me firmly say, I am not hiding the fact that I'm a hawk anymore. I believe in bombing the shit out of these people, these dictators in the world, 100%. And I'm not prepared to compromise and will never compromise on my conviction that intervention is the only option, because it's not just about maintaining the strategic upper hand. It's not just about stability in the world. It is about ridding humanity of filth. It is about purging the most disgusting human elements in our existence. It is about liberating oppressed masses. And it is the most, what I would argue, morally consistent view that anyone could have if they are liberal, is to be a liberal hawk. And of course the reaction that people have is, oh, you're filthy, you're a no good neocon, all this stuff. And of course I own the label neocon as well, right? There's nothing wrong with being a neoconservative. I'm a social liberal, but if you're a conservative neocon, we can work together. I disagree with Bush on a lot of stuff like abortion. Guess what? He still did more for liberal values by taking out Saddam, who was so much more ultra-conservative. I mean, Bush looks like a weed-toking hippie compared to Saddam. Saddam executed anyone for doing anything, for spilling coffee on a piece of paper that had his image on it. You get the death penalty, your family goes to the gulags. Just, what a waste of humanity that these regimes have inflicted. I believe in bombing the shit out of them. I'm 100% apologetic about that. And I generally try to keep this channel clean, as you know. But in this particular issue, I have only contempt. 100% contempt for these monsters. Because this is a battle of good and evil. And that was one motivating factor that led me to say, I cannot hide this aspect of me anymore. I am a proud hawk. Another was reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn's work. If you've ever read, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, for example, The Gulag Archipelago is another one, you would know what these dictatorships are actually like. You would get a view. You wouldn't know as you would if you were somebody who experienced it. But he does as great a job as possible to let somebody from the outside actually know what it's like. And you realize that, well, sure, this happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s. No, this still goes on. North Korea still exists. They have gulags. China just rounded up 1.5 million Uyghurs. They have gulags. I mean, this is something that will continue as long as the illiberal, authoritarian despots of the world are able to continue to propagate and sustain themselves. In other words, until we liberate the world of these dictatorships, these atrocities will continue. And though it may be 2019 and we have all this great technology and lit cars and everything over here, there are parts of the world that look like other planets that are so fundamentally dark ages. Saudi Arabia, Iran, North Korea. I want to take them all out. The only question is, what order do we do it in? And I believe Iran and North Korea have to go first. But Saudi Arabia is next, and it goes on and on and on from there, right? And I will, be making more videos about this topic. This is just one opportunity that I wanted to take to share my thoughts on this. And I'm curious to know, for other liberal hawks and conservatives out there, have you lost friends over politics before? Because in my view, if you're going to lose friends over anything, politics is probably the most reasonable one to lose friends over. If you lose friends over some silly dispute about different favorite colors as an example, or even to an extent relationships and stuff like that, those in my view are less fundamental than political differences, especially when it relates to democracy versus despotism, or anti-Semitism versus non-anti-Semitism. I mean, it's just, it is untenable, in my view, to maintain relationships with people like that. There's not even room for debate in a lot of these circumstances, because if you're somebody who views Assad as a good guy, and you've studied the same stuff, again, this is not about an issue of somebody who just heard about politics and thinks Assad's a good guy, and all of a sudden I'm going to be a douchebag and unfriend them or whatever. No. These people that I'm referring to, more or less all were fairly well versed in politics. They knew the stats, all the figures and everything, and they were cool with it. They were cool because they see him as the good guy. There are people out there that literally view Stalin and the disgrace, the atrocity, the Holodomor that happened. They don't deny the Holodomor. They think that he should have killed more Ukrainians. There are people out there that think like that. There are people out there that defend dictators, dead dictators, whose systems have long since faded into the dustbin of history. There are people out there that will still conduct apologia for them. And they'll do it on Facebook or Messenger or the most advanced other forms of technology that we've ever created for communication. And they'll promote the most dark ages ideas that you can imagine. It's a disgrace, and I only have positive things to say about the experience of finally doing away and saying, I'm not going to continue to maintain relationships with people like this. That is a line too far. We can have a debate over taxes. We can have a debate over other issues like that. Here's what we're not having a debate about. Is Assad a good guy or a bad guy? That's not up for debate. It's just not. Same goes for Kim. Same goes for Putin. Same goes for the Ayatollah. And so I now only surround myself with people that I share fundamental values with. And my life has been much better as a result. I am much more psychologically healthier. And I would recommend that everybody who's watching this do the same thing, because you're only going to make your life better. And maybe if we all act as a group on this, we can actually get a lot of these people that are on the fence or whatever to say, actually, I'm going to lose friends over defending Assad. Because, I lost friends over not defending Assad, right? Being against Assad. We need to turn that around. We need to, as a community, make defending these dictators, making statements that are anti-American, as so toxic and so unacceptable that you lose friends for those. We need to change the discourse. We need to change the culture. We need to end the era of cringe and usher in the liberal hawk and neoconservative renaissance. And so that is part of what I'm aiming to do here on YouTube. If I can be a small part of that, that would give great meaning to me in my life. So thank you for watching YouTube.